The night before my convocation, I was standing in the driveway in February, in socks. Not shoes, socks. Because I hadn't had time to grab my shoes before my mother opened the front door and told me to get out. The temperature in Winnipeg in February doesn't negotiate. It was -22 with the wind chill. I know that because I'd checked my phone that afternoon, thinking about what to wear under my graduation gown the next morning. Now I was standing on the frozen driveway in a thin cardigan and socks, watching my breath come out in panicked little clouds, and the door behind me was locked. My phone was at 9%. I didn't call out. I didn't bang on the door. I just stood there for a second, feeling the cold crawl up through the soles of my feet. And I thought, this is the part where I'm supposed to fall apart. But before I tell you what my grandmother found in my brother's email that changed everything, I want you to understand something. This wasn't the first time. It was just the first time I had a witness. The cold didn't just live outside. It lived in that house. It had lived there for as long as I could remember. The particular chill of a home where one child is the sun and another is expected to orbit quietly and be grateful for the light. My brother's name is Brennan. He's 3 years older than me. Growing up, Brennan was the kind of kid adults described as charming, by which they meant he knew how to perform sincerity so convincingly that it took years to notice the performance. He had our mother's laugh and our late father's eyes, and she had never really recovered from losing my father. And I think somewhere in her grief, she had decided that Brennan was the piece of him she got to keep. I was the other piece, the quieter one, the one who looked more like her side of the family. The one she loved, I think, in the distracted way you love something you're not quite sure what to do with. I had worked for 4 years at the University of Manitoba for my degree in civil engineering. I had taken out student loans. I had worked weekends at a coffee shop on Portage Avenue. I had applied for every bursary and scholarship I could find, staying up past midnight filling out forms, writing personal statements, explaining over and over in 500 words or less what this education meant to me and why I deserved it. I had done all of it quietly, without complaint, because complaining was Brennan's territory, and I had learned early not to compete with him for space. The convocation was at 10 in the morning. I had my gown hanging on the back of my bedroom door. My cap was on the dresser. I had been planning the stay for 4 years, maybe longer. Since the night my father died and my mother sat at the kitchen table and told us that we were going to have to be smart about money now, that there was no safety net, that we were on our own. I was 14. I had taken her seriously in a way I don't think she intended. The dinner table that night started like every other family dinner. My mother had made her chicken and wild rice. Brennan was talking about a business idea he'd been developing, some kind of e-commerce thing he'd explained to us 3 or 4 times in slightly different ways, always with a new name, always with the same basic shape, quick money, no real plan. The assumption that enthusiasm was a substitute for preparation. My mother was nodding. She always nodded when Brennan talked about his ideas. Then he stopped mid-sentence. He picked up his phone. He read something. And his face changed. He looked at me. "Where is it?" he said. I put down my fork. "Where is what?" "The money," he said. "The rest." My stomach dropped. I knew what the rest part was. It was the registered education savings plan my father had set up before he died. There wasn't much in it. About $14,000. My mother had told both of us about it years ago. Told us it was there for education, split equally between us. Brennan had never gone to university. I had assumed, because I was apparently still capable of assumption, that his half had simply sat there. "I haven't touched the Respock," I said. "I haven't touched anything." "It's empty," Brennan said. He turned his phone screen toward me. I could see the account summary from where I was sitting. 0 balance. $7,000 was supposed to be in there. My half, from my business. I was going to use it as seed capital. "That money was for education," I said. "It's my money. It's an education savings account." "Okay, semantics," Brennan said. And that word, semantics, the casual contempt of it, the way he waved away a legal distinction like it was a minor inconvenience, something cracked open in my chest. The point is, it's gone. And the last person to touch this account was you, because you're the one who actually went to university, so I'd like to know what happened to my $7,000. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her plate. Mom, I said, I never accessed Brendan's portion. I only ever withdrew from my own half, and only for tuition, which is what it's for. She pressed her lips together. Brendan says the account is empty. Then someone else emptied it. It wasn't me. You had the login information. So did you. So did he. Brennan's voice went very quiet, which was worse than when he yelled. I want to know what you did with my money, and I want to know right now. And then it happened quickly, the way it always happened in that house. My mother's voice shifted, that particular frequency that meant she had already decided that the conversation was now a formality. She said I needed to think very carefully about what I was saying. She said this was a serious accusation. She said if I couldn't account for what had happened, maybe I should take some time outside to think about it. I said I was not going outside. She said she thought I was. I said, Mom, my convocation is tomorrow morning at 10. She said, then you'd better figure this out tonight. And then the door was open, and I was on the other side of it, in socks, in February, in Winnipeg, and the lock clicked shut behind me. I stood there. The wind came across the flat prairie dark with nothing to stop it, and I felt it cut through my cardigan like it was tissue paper. My feet were already going numb. I thought about the chicken and wild rice still on the table going cold. I thought about my graduation gown on the back of the bedroom door. I thought about whether I was going to lose a toe tonight, and then I thought, call Grandma. She answered on the second ring. It was 8:43 at night. She never went to bed before 11. She was 71 years old, and she had lived alone in her house in East Kildonan since my grandfather passed 8 years ago, and she was the sharpest person I had ever known, the kind of sharp that doesn't announce itself. I told her what happened. I kept my voice steady. I told her I was outside in February in socks, and my convocation was in the morning, and I needed somewhere to sleep. She said, I'm coming. I said, you don't have to drive out here. I can call a cab. She said, I'm coming, and she hung up. 26 minutes. That's how long I stood on the driveway before her headlights turned onto the street. I had moved to the side of the garage where there was slightly less wind. My feet had gone from numb to a deep, specific ache. I was thinking about the things people think about when their body is focused on keeping itself warm and their brain goes very quiet and clear. I thought about my father. I thought about the first day of university. I thought about the scholarship applications and the Saturday shifts and the 4 years of keeping my head down and doing the work. I thought about the fact that I had a 3.8 GPA and a degree in civil engineering, and I was standing on a frozen driveway in socks because my brother wanted someone to blame for his own choices. My grandmother parked on the street. She didn't turn the car off. She got out, walked straight to me, took one look at my feet, and said one word, inside. She had a blanket in the back seat, the kind she kept there from October to April because she had lived in Manitoba her whole life and understood that the province would try to kill you if you let your guard down. She put it around my shoulders before I was fully in the car. She turned the heat to maximum. She didn't say anything for the first 2 minutes. She just drove. Then she said, How long have you been out there? About half an hour. She made a sound I couldn't fully interpret. It wasn't quite anger. It was something older and colder and much more deliberate. Does Brennan still have access to that Respect account? She asked. I think so. Mom set it up years ago. We both had the information. She nodded slowly. She said nothing else until we got to her house. She made me tea. She found dry wool socks that had belonged to my grandfather. She sat across the kitchen table from me, both hands around her own mug, and she looked at me with the expression she used when she was working through a problem. I need to make a call, she said. Will you be all right for a few minutes? I said yes. She was gone for 20 minutes. I sat at the table that I had sat at every Sunday growing up, doing homework or helping her shell peas or just existing in the uncomplicated warmth of her kitchen, and I drank my tea and I waited. When she came back, she had her laptop with her. She sat down, opened it, and turned the screen toward me. "Your uncle works at the credit union where that account is held," she said. "He owes me a conversation. He can't tell me everything, but he told me enough." On the screen was a printed document she'd photographed. It was a Respart transaction summary. The withdrawals from Brennan's portion were listed in chronological order. The most recent one was 2 months ago. Before that, 3 months ago. Before that, 6 months ago. None of the dates matched any time I had touched the account. "He took his own money," I said slowly. "He emptied it himself." "Over the past year," my grandmother said, "in 4 separate transactions." I stared at the screen. The number that should have been there wasn't, because Brennan had removed it piece by piece over 12 months, and then, tonight, sat across the dinner table from me and said, "Where is it?" "He knew it was gone," I said. "He knew it was gone," I said. "He knew exactly where it was. He went looking for a reason tonight." My grandmother's expression didn't change. She had already reached this conclusion. She had probably reached it before she'd finished her phone call. "There's more," she said. She didn't apologize for saying it. She just said it, and then she opened the email. I need to explain something about my grandmother. She is meticulous in the way that people are meticulous when they have spent a lifetime watching careless people make messes that everyone else has to clean up. She keeps records. She keeps receipts. She keeps receipts. She keeps emails. She had been the one helping me track scholarship applications since my first year, because she had a system and I needed one, and she had offered without being asked. 3 months ago, she had forwarded me a confirmation email from the University of Manitoba's awards office. A scholarship, not a small one, the Northern Promise Engineering Award, $12,000 annually, renewable for 2 years, based on academic achievement and a personal statement. I had written that personal statement in her kitchen on a Tuesday night in October, and she had read it over, and she had said, quietly, "This is very good." I had submitted it and waited and heard nothing and eventually assumed I hadn't gotten it. The email on the screen was a reply to a confirmation, sent from my account. Dated 6 weeks ago, it was a withdrawal of my scholarship application. I had not sent that email. I stared at it. My hands went very still around the mug. "How?" I said. "You were logged into your student portal on the family laptop over Christmas," my grandmother said. "The one that's still in the living room. You mentioned it. You said you checked something quickly when you were there for dinner." I remembered. I had checked my transcript. I thought I logged out. "He had your password," she said. "Or he didn't need it. He just waited until the browser kept you logged in." The email was polite and formal, the kind of language the Student Awards Office would expect. It cited a change in personal circumstances. It thanked them for their consideration. It was signed with my full name. I had not written it. I had not sent it. I had never seen it until this moment. My grandmother sat quietly and let me read it twice. Then she said, "The graduation is at 10 tomorrow morning." "Yes, then we have some things to do tonight." She was not asking. We drove back to my mother's house at 11:15. My grandmother did not call ahead. She parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, and walked to the front door like she had been walking to that front door her entire life, which she had because it had been her son's house before it became her daughter-in-law's, and that was a detail that was about to matter a great deal. She knocked. My mother answered in her housecoat, visibly startled. "Mum," my mother started. She always called my grandmother Mum. It had always struck me as a little performance, the warmth of it. I wasn't expecting, "Is Brennan here?" my grandmother said. "He's watching TV, we've all just been." "Call him out, please." My mother's face arranged itself into the expression she used when she thought someone was being unreasonable. "It's late, whatever this is, Brennan," my grandmother said, her voice carrying clearly into the house. "Come out here, please." There was a pause. Then the sound of the TV lowering. Then footsteps. Brennan appeared behind my mother in the hallway, arms crossed, already performing casual. "Hey, Grandma," he said. My grandmother did not say hey back. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I want you to think before you answer, because I have documentation and I know what the answers are. I'm asking because I want to see if you'll tell the truth." My mother said, "This really isn't necessary. There's been a misunderstanding." "There has been," my grandmother agreed. "Brennan, did you withdraw your own Respoct funds?" A beat. "I mean, it's my money. All 4 withdrawals. Over the past 12 months. Another beat. Shorter. Something shifting in his face. "I had some expenses. So you knew the account was empty tonight when you accused your sister?" My mother started to speak. My grandmother held up one hand, just one hand, and my mother went quiet. I had never seen that happen before. "And were you aware," my grandmother continued, "that the Northern Promise Engineering Award at the University of Manitoba was worth $12,000 a year?" Brennan said nothing. "Because someone logged into your sister's student account 6 weeks ago from the browser history on the family laptop at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, which I'm told was a day she was at work, and sent a withdrawal letter to the awards office. In her name." The hallway went very quiet. My mother turned to look at Brennan, and for the first time in my memory, she didn't look like she was managing the situation. She looked like she was seeing it. "Brennan," she said. Her voice was different, smaller. "She was gonna leave," Brennan said. And there was something naked in it, something I hadn't expected. Not cruelty exactly. Panic. "She gets that scholarship, she's gone. She gets a job downtown. She moves out. She's done. She doesn't need us anymore. She was just going to leave." Nobody said anything. "She was always going to leave," he said, quieter. "And everyone was going to say how amazing she was, and she was going to forget about all of us, and I needed more time." My mother made a sound. It wasn't quite a word. My grandmother looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at my mother. "She got in off her own merit," my grandmother said. "She earned that money. She earned that degree. She was standing outside in -22 tonight because of a lie he told to buy himself time, and she has a convocation at 10 in the morning." She paused. "I'll be taking her back with me tonight. The scholarship office opens at 8:30. We'll be there when it does." My mother said, "I didn't know about the scholarship?" "No," my grandmother said. "But you locked her out in February in socks without asking a single question. So I'd think carefully tonight about what kind of relationship you want to have with your daughter going forward." She turned. She walked back to the car. I followed her. I didn't look back at the doorway. I heard my mother say my name, once, and I kept walking. The cold hit my face, and it felt different this time. It didn't feel like punishment. It just felt like weather. In the car, my grandmother turned the heat back on. She pulled out of the driveway. She said nothing for a minute and a half, which I had learned over 27 years was her way of giving a situation the silence it deserved. Then she said, "You should sleep. We have to be at the university early." "Grandma," I said, "the scholarship. Is it actually still? Can they reinstate it?" "I've already spoken to the department chair," she said, "former colleague of your grandfather's. We had a conversation this evening while you were sitting at my kitchen table. He was horrified. These things can be corrected when there's evidence of fraud." She glanced over. "There is evidence of fraud." I looked out the window at the Winnipeg streets going past. The flat dark of a Manitoba February, the orange glow of the streetlights on the snow. "I didn't know you knew the department chair," I said. "There's quite a lot I know that doesn't come up in regular conversation," she said. I almost laughed. I didn't quite, but almost. She had the guest room made up. She had a housecoat on the back of the door that was clean and warm and smelled like her linen closet. She had a glass of water on the nightstand. She had thought of all of it before I got there, the way she always thought of everything before anyone arrived, because she was a woman who understood that love was most usefully expressed through preparation. I lay in the dark for a while, not sleeping. I thought about Brennan's face when he said she was always going to leave. I had expected vindication to feel cleaner than this. It felt complicated. It felt like understanding something about someone that you would rather not understand, because understanding it means you can't go back to the simpler story. But I also thought about the graduation gown on the back of my bedroom door, and I thought about standing on that driveway and not falling apart, and I thought about my grandmother on the phone at 9 o'clock at night, pulling a thread that unraveled everything, and I thought, I come from her. Whatever else I come from her. At 8:45 the next morning, we were sitting across from the associate registrar in the awards office. My grandmother had printed the email, the browser history log, the Respark transaction summary, and a 2-paragraph letter she had written herself, clear and factual, without a single unnecessary word. The reinstatement took 40 minutes. At 10:05, I walked across the stage in my cap and gown and shook the dean's hand and accepted my degree, and in the third row of the investors group field convocation floor, in a gray wool coat and sensible heels, my grandmother stood up and clapped. Not politely, actually clapped. A few people around her joined in because her certainty was contagious. My mother was not there. I don't know if she was invited technically. I hadn't called her. She sent a text at 9:47 that said, "I'm proud of you." I read it in the car before we went in. I didn't reply that morning. That's a different conversation, one that takes more than a text message and more than one night to work through. And I've come to understand that not everything needs to be resolved quickly, to be resolved honestly. What I know is this. My brother thought he could take up more space by shrinking mine. He thought he could delay my life to extend his own, redirect my future to compensate for the one he hadn't built. He thought that love and proximity were the same thing, that if I stayed close enough, stayed small enough, stayed in debt and underfunded and dependent, I would stay. He was wrong about all of it. My grandmother took me for breakfast after the ceremony, just the two of us, at a diner on Henderson Highway she'd been going to since before my father was born. We had eggs and coffee, and she told me about the summer she spent working in Thunder Bay when she was 24, a story I'd never heard, and I listened to it thinking about how many versions of her there are that I don't know yet, how many years of her I still get to learn. The scholarship was reinstated in full. I accepted it. I started my position at a civil engineering firm in downtown Winnipeg the following March. I still have the socks. The wool ones from my grandfather's drawer, I kept them. Some things you keep not because they're useful, but because they remind you of the moment you understood exactly who was standing in your corner and why that turned out to be enough. I still think about those socks sometimes. My grandfather's wool socks, the ones my grandmother pulled out of a drawer without hesitating, like she'd been keeping them ready for exactly this kind of night. There's something I've come to understand about the way that evening unfolded. Not everything that happens to us is random. The night my brother sat across that dinner table and pointed at me, he was counting on something that had always worked before, that the person with the louder voice and the longer history of being believed would win. He was counting on the fact that I had spent years being quiet, and that my quietness looked like guilt to people who had never had to question him. But here's what he miscalculated. Every year I spent working weekends at that coffee shop, every scholarship application I filled out past midnight, every time I chose to build something real instead of looking for a shortcut. That wasn't just practicality. That was integrity, lived out in small decisions that no one was watching. And it accumulated. It became a record. It became a grandmother who had watched me closely enough to know exactly what I was and wasn't capable of, and who picked up the phone on the second ring. My grandmother didn't save me because she was powerful, though she turned out to be more connected than I knew. She saved me because she was meticulous in the way that honest people are meticulous. She kept records, she asked precise questions, she didn't fill in the blanks with what she wanted to believe. When she sat across from my uncle and pieced together the transaction history, she wasn't working from emotion. She was working from clarity. That kind of clear-eyed thinking, the willingness to look at evidence rather than lean on assumption, is one of the most useful things a person can carry through their life. I watched her do it in real time, and I understood, maybe for the first time, that intelligence isn't just about what you know. It's about how honestly you're willing to see. And my brother. I thought about what he said on the porch for a long time now. She was always going to leave. There was real pain in it. I don't think he was a monster. I think he was someone who had been handed everything so consistently that he genuinely didn't know how to build anything. And when he saw that I did, it frightened him. He tried to shrink the distance between us by pulling me back rather than pushing himself forward. That's a choice, though. pain doesn't make it less of a choice. The consequences weren't delivered by luck. They came directly from what each of us had actually done. I had built something honest and it held. He had built something honest and it held. He had built something on borrowed time and borrowed blame, and when it was examined clearly, it collapsed. That's not fate. That's just cause and effect, which is less poetic, but more reliable. I walked across that stage at 10 in the morning, and my grandmother stood up in the third row and actually clapped. Not politely, like she meant it. I keep those socks. Not for warmth. As a reminder that the most important decisions I made were the quiet ones. The late nights, the honest applications, the years of choosing not to take shortcuts. Nobody saw most of them. They mattered anyway.